Tessa Dunlop, historian and author. Tessa Dunlop, how the heck are you?
Very well, actually. I'm imagining what it might be like if there was a cyber warfare attack right now in London, because for some unknown reason I don't have internet. So I'm sitting in a cab patched through a very kind Mr. Trevor the driver's mobile phone to talk to you.
Good
and
old Trev.
The question about why we commemorate and why it's important.
Yeah.
And Ian, generally I'm seen as being on the progressive left. Some people even
I wouldn't even say progressive with you, Tessa, but that's another story.
Okay, that is another story. But it's interesting how I differ now from some of that camp on commemoration, because I believe strongly in commemorative events and anniversaries. That's grist to my mill. You could argue I'm a historian. That's what I write about. Why is it so important? Because actually, and today's world speaks to this, freedom is not free. And if we don't lionize, and I use that word with caution, but I think it's the right word. If we don't lionize our heroes and the men and women who serve in our military, both then and now, how do we expect them to go the extra mile when the worst happens?
Good point.
You have to big them up as heroes, because they have to go above and beyond in a way that's unimaginable. And I think it's important that we use the past to remind us in the present, freedom is not free.
Yeah, that's a great phrase, and really does sum up the very serious sense of what we're talking about here. Of course, back in 1945, 80 years ago today, yes, there was jubilation. There were people planning street parties, going to church services, goodness knows what. Of course, there were many others where the day was not quite as jubilant for obvious reasons. Little boys and girls didn't come back because, of course, they were out there fighting. And, of course, also worth remembering, don't need to tell you this, Tessa, that today doesn't mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the war, because that was a few months down the line, but it does mark victory in Europe, which, of course, was centre to all of this. I was saying earlier, I can't imagine growing up at that time and being around at that time when the entirety of your short existence on the planet as a kid and then into adulthood would have been completely enveloped and informed by this event.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, I've just written this new book, Lest We Forget. It's all about the way in which we commemorate. And if I speak to, and I do speak to, individuals who served then and who felt unseen because for whatever reason they weren't in uniform. A classic example is the Bevan boys, and they were 80,000 men longing to get stuck into the Germans, because that is how they felt. That is how they were brought up to feel. They come of age. It's 1944, the big push across the channel, and they're tapped on the shoulder. No, mate, your name's come up in a ballot. You've to go mining. Sorry about that. No uniform, loads of sideways looks, loads of suspicion. People didn't realise they were drafted. They were compelled to serve underground, and they have lived under the shadow. They've not been involved in march past. They were overlooked by the British Legion. Only in 2013 did the Bevan boys get seen, get their memorial, get their badge. And actually, it's a reminder of the pride that was taken, the pride at stake of serving in your uniform, the pride of actually going out there for, at the time, king and country. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have pride in our military, Ian. And it's one of the reasons why I think exceptionalism can be dangerous. You know that. I'm a Ramona. You know that I worry about us over egging the kind of British pudding. But I think one of the reasons why we've been so unequivocal on supporting Ukraine, and we do poll, it's about 80%, the British public support for Ukraine, is because we understand the importance of revering and respecting and serving in your military. We understand the value of freedom. We were fortunate enough, partly because of our geographical island status, we were fortunate enough to be serving and fighting on the right side in World War II, and that's informed what we've done ever since. Not all our calls are correct, but last night, part of this project, I was speaking to a mother of a son who died in Afghanistan. Yes, that's a contested war. Many of the wars we've fought subsequently, because there has been no peacetime, let's own that. Many of the wars we fought subsequently have been controversial, sometimes actually questionable in terms of their aims. But the men and women who served, they were never, very rarely actually, called into question. That idea of a British military uniform and it being the best of the best, that's what we need to work towards, hold on to, never don't question it. We need to always interrogate it. But the day we lose pride in that uniform and that service is a very worrying day indeed, I think, Ian.
Indeed. And just a final point about why we must never forget. I said at the beginning of the programme, Tessa, my little boy came down this morning. He's 6. He says, Daddy, can I have my iPad today because it's VE Day? So he was using this as a little mechanism. And I said, OK, what do you know about VE Day? And they've been teaching it at school, which I was really pleased to hear. And he knew that some soldiers had died, and he knew that, you know, we must remember those soldiers. And I was... Given we spend so long talking about what is and isn't on the curriculum, what sort of interest groups want to take things out or put things in, the fact that it's still there is great, but it must always be there, Tessa, surely.
Yeah, although I'm going to just be a little bit naughty here and say, can you give me the start and end dates of, say, the Napoleonic Wars?
Good point. Yeah. So how far do we go?
So, indeed. Remember, there was a whole generation of schoolboys growing up in the 19th century that were playing soldiers against French troops, not against German troops. And these things evolve. Nowadays, you know, it's American.
And on that point, Tessa's, I think she mentioned the French, I think. Obviously, she did say about there being digital warfare with her line to us. I think that's probably what did it. I think government central office just thought, no, we can't have any of that romanticising the French. Tessa Dunlop, historian and author. Her book, Lest We Forget, War and Peace in 100 British Monuments. She knows her terrain, and she is very proud, as she said at the beginning, despite her politics being elsewhere on so many other things. If you know Tessa, you'll know what I'm talking about. But on this one, we should lionise those who fought. Let's get a word now with Jonny the Fish Haynes, who was a World War II evacuee. Jonny, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
Lovely to have you with us. I mean, just give us your overview firstly. When somebody says VE Day, does that feel to you very special? You remember the actual day yourself when you were a kid?
I do. I was at school, and the headmaster come onto the platform in the morning, and he said, I've got some good news to tell you, that the war is over.
Wow. And
you have got the rest of the day off. And I went home, and everybody where I lived had heard the news, and they started putting out flags. And there were no flags in there, but homemade flags. And in the evening, we collected all the rubbish, and we had a bonfire in the middle of our road. And that was in Devon. I was evacuated to Devon in 1939, and I went to a school called Tennyson Street School, and the teacher said, you've got to go home, get a suitcase, you're going to be evacuated. I, being poor, I lived in the slums. I had to go with a pillowcase, and I went on a steam train from Paddington, and they stopped us off at different stations. And in the evening, the lady come and picked me out, and I went back, and that's the first time in my life I've seen an electric light bulb. And also I had sheets on my bed. Never seen that before.
How did that feel as a kid, being taken away?
Well, it was all new. It was all new to me. And the lady gave me a meal, and I couldn't eat it because I wasn't used to it. I used to have bread and jam and dripping. Yeah. And I wasn't used to the food. And but I survived because where I lived, you had to be tough. And but getting back to the end of the war, it was great to see all along the coast. I could see flares along the Devon coast where people were having fires because of the end of the war. And during the war, if I can mention it, I was in Torquay, and the thousands and thousands of American troops were there. And I don't want to be racist, but the black boys was in tents, and the white soldiers was in hotels.
That's
which
interesting.
I thought that was bad.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that with the Americans being in Torquay, they shut all the roads off so that nobody could go down to see them coming out from the harbour. Sure. They were going over in small corvettes, and it was very, very emotional for me during the war when you see hundreds and hundreds of American troops walking around Torquay during the war.
It's extraordinary that I mean, we see this stuff written about and we watch it in films. You were there. You saw it. You were experiencing this.
I actually saw in the war, and also during the war, they used to come across the sea at low level.
Yeah. And
shoot the town up in Torquay. And the church that I used to go to, St Mary Church, they bombed and hit the church, and they killed 50 children in there.
Oh my goodness.
And most of them were evacuees from some orphanage.
So for goodness sake! So they'd escaped, the cities in order to, to go to an area where it was unlikely the Germans would attack. But not everybody was immune from it, even if you were in a place that was seen as relative safety.
It was a Sunday morning for the young pilots to come over into Torquay with cannon fire and shoot the town up and drop occasional bomb, but they hit the church and killed all the children.
Oh, dear me.
And the pilot who killed the children was buried next to the grave in Hill Village Cemetery in Torquay.
Interesting.
And the other thing about we could hear the bombers going over to bomb Plymouth. I could lay. We had an indoor shelter, Morrison shelter. They had Anderson shelter was in gardens, but Morrison shelters was in the house.
Okay.
And you got inside this flat, thick steel shelter, and you could hear the bombers going over to bomb Plymouth. I could hear them going over. They had a different sound to our planes.
So what sort of age were you at this stage, Johnny?
I was, at that age, I was 10.
Wow.
10 years of age.
One of the things we mentioned at the beginning was that people of your generation, so I mean, to experience all of that, and I suppose the consolation, is that you knew no different. This is the world you'd grown up in as a kid.
That's exactly right.
And so as daunting and as harrowing as it is to listen to some of this, that was your reality at the time. Going forward, and I hate that phrase going forward, but just moving forward literally in terms of your own life, did that era kind of... did that inform sort of you as a person for the rest of your life, as it were? Because it's such a profound experience to go through.
It's. Can I explain to you about when I was before the war? I was a young boy, and my mother used to send me to the dairy with a cup to get cracked eggs because we were slums. We had no money. My mum was in hospital. She had a broken leg. And but we had it really, really tough. We used to have to go to the nuns up at Clapham Common, the House of God, to get... The nuns used to go around shops collecting food for the poor. Wow. And I used to have to go there with a bag to get some cakes and stale bread.
As a kid, as a little one.
As a kid.
Do you think the era that followed, just briefly if we can, Johnny, because we could talk to you forever, sir, but the era that followed as this was over and you moved back to your own reality and family and the like, were those years kind? Did they create a certain community, do you think?
I came back to London at 13, just after the war had finished. And I passed to go to a college down in Devon, and my father didn't want me to go. I was top of my class. Oh. And I came back to London, and I was 13 years of age, and I went to work 48-hour week for £1. No national health in them days. No. And when you went to the doctor, it was 1 shilling.
Yeah, because there was no...
And that,
yeah.
that was in 1945.
Well, listen, it's more than a pleasure, Jonny, to speak to you. I mean, let's speak again, because there's so much more to say about that, but that's an abridged version of Jonny's journey.